This is Taylor Mason, and I'm here today with Representative Jeff Coleman. This is an ongoing oral history project on the history of the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus, diversity in the House, and impact on members and staff. So thank you so much for doing this today.
My pleasure.
Okay, so I know you've done an oral history before, but maybe if someone's listening to this for the first time, just give us a little background about yourself and how you got to the House.
Sure. Well, I was a very young person when I was 24 when I announced that I was running for the House, and eventually when I won was 25. Ran in Armstrong and Indiana counties, the 60th legislative district, and that so I had the southern portion of Indiana and then kind of the southern central part of Armstrong County, coal, steel, poor legislative district. I wasn't originally from there. My mom was from the Philippines. Dad is an American. They met in the Navy, so my history kind of is intertwined with Philippine history and living there when I was young. And then my dad is a Presbyterian minister. That's what took us to southwestern PA. So it was not my home area. In fact, I remember people, when I was going door to door, someone said to me, they saw my hair and they said, well, don't tell them you're Filipino, tell them you're Italian to help make a better connection. But my district was 67% Democrat. I was a Republican, and Republicans had targeted that seat several cycles before, unsuccessfully. And we ran a door-to-door, person-to-person, very low budget campaign, and ran 100% positive, did not attack our opponent in any way, contrasted on issues, but we're very careful to be respectful. And I won by probably a 1.5 points, or it was a very, very close race in 2000, then ran for re-election again and won both ballots, and then retired after 2 terms and launched a business.
Okay. So you kind of hinted at this at one of my questions, but when you were campaigning, or your constituents in general, did they treat you any differently because of your diverse cultural background? Did it play a role in any way?
No, and I think if anything, having the Filipino background is unique in the sense that so many people have positive connections with Filipinos. One, because there are so many Filipino nurses and doctors, and that is the nurses shortage in the 70s and 80s was addressed by Filipinos. So almost everybody has a caregiver who's Filipino, and Filipinos are just they're just a happy, joyful people. So people have good things to say about Filipinos. The other piece of it is that because the largest base in the Navy base in the Pacific was Subic Naval Base, and then there was Clerk Air Force Base in the northern part of the country. The Filipinos have very, very strong ties to Americans. In fact, Filipinos, when they're surveyed, have a higher opinion of America than Americans do. So typically around 93-94% in Gallup polls, Filipinos have a positive view of America. So if anything, it was almost the reverse. It was very, very positive.
Okay, that's good to know. So when you got to the House, did that impact the way members looked at you, or was it still the same kind of thing? Was it very positive?
It was generally very positive. I can't remember a negative. Now, at the time, I was one of 2 members who had an Asian American background. John Pippy, who was my seatmate, was half Thai, and so he was a Thai American, and I was a Filipino American, and we sat next to each other on the floor of the House. So he was just a little bit ahead of me, West Point graduate, but I think we were the first. He would have been the first Asian American. I would have been the second. Patty Kim later came in, but no, and maybe, and this partially could be that most Asian groups, I wouldn't say for every Asian group, but especially Filipino Americans, and I would say perhaps Thai Americans would fit into this. Unlike Korean Americans or Vietnamese Americans, have less of a kind of an enclave approach to assimilation, and they are right into the mainstream of the culture. The other thing is, in the Philippines, English is the official language. So because there are 80 different dialects, I speak Tagalog, which is the main Filipino dialect, and English, but all of your commerce, all of your official political documents is handled in English. So,
okay, that's good to know. Now, this oral history is mainly focused on the Black Caucus and diversity in the House.
Yeah.
To Republican, there was probably not a caucus role like that.
No.
Did you work with any sort of diverse caucusing groups or?
So I found, it's interesting, and this is the same thing in college. Now, whether it's just my love of diverse cultures, I had a great deal of affinity for members of the Black Caucus, and so I had friendships with people like Louise Bishop, who, we had an affinity for gospel music, and she was, of course, a radio personality in Philadelphia for many, many years. And then other members of the Black Caucus that I thought were in some ways, perhaps it was because I had lived in Germantown for a little while and Philly, but any cultural distinctives made it easier for me at some level to relate. And I'm kind of sure that's probably the same experience with most people who have minority background, is that because you do learn an appreciation for food, for music, for culture, for travel, for different kinds of people, because you didn't spend all of your growing up years in the same zip code. Mm-hmm. I think so. When you encounter people who are creatures of Northeast Philly or from a community in Allegheny County, and you realize, that their whole life is around their church, their block, their school. The guy who succeeded me, my friend Jeff Pyle, his whole life was really on one street, on 4th Avenue in Ford City. His school, the mayor's office where he worked, his house, and that was very new to me. So people who grew up cross-culturally or who have a minority background, I think, find each other in a place like the house.
Okay, well, that's really good to know too. So during your recent political race, I was looking at some of your sites and seeing on there, you talked about Filipino values, that you would bring those values to the role of lieutenant governor. What sort of values is that? And could you explain, what's that then?
So there is, I think the reigning value, and I don't know that this would be set down, written anywhere, but I'd say that the defining value for Filipino Americans is an openness and a welcoming to other kinds of people. That's just a universal trait of Filipinos. There will be exceptions, but I think when people visit the Philippines, what they find out is that not only are you welcomed with open arms, but no matter who you are welcome. So there isn't this wall of immediate rejection or prejudice. You find it's just an openness, and an outgrowth of that is a signature trait of hospitality that I really viewed. I thought one of the roles a lieutenant governor could play in terms of building bridges between people with diverse opinions is thinking about how you could utilize the Senate dining room or other pieces of real estate for relationship building and hospitality. I think those would be incredibly important. And then there's a certain kind of a flavor of kindness that Filipinos are known for, and that is part of the openness. That's part of the generosity. My mom never leaves our home without leaving a hidden envelope of money somewhere. That's the same I've noticed for Koreans, for Singaporeans, Asian cultures. In addition to taking your shoes off before you come in the house, you always bring a gift, and in Tagalog we call it a pasalubong. It's bringing something along. It could be a small token. It could be something more elaborate. And I've seen that with, we have Egyptian friends. They come, they bring a lot of food and other, toys and things. They think about everybody individually. But, in some ways, American culture generally has just lost the sense of the uniqueness and the special, and of what is special about the individual. And there's, politics can feel very generic and kind of reduced to just a handful of slogans or checkbox issues on the left and on the right. So I think those, if we were able to, and I had the privilege of welcoming Filipino delegations to the Capitol. We welcomed the guy who would eventually become the foreign minister, the Filipino ambassador. We had a congressman, various folks that came to the Capitol. And so we tried, and it was a little bit new, and it does certainly cost money, but to extend real hospitality and have gift exchanges and things like that, I think would be very important. But that easily can get lost in this supercharged, hyper-partisan environment. Mm-hmm. Those little niceties are very important.
Yeah. I have one more question, unless there's anything else you'd like to on this topic. So in terms of the legislature, what do you hope to see in terms of future policy with diversity, or in general, society as a whole with diversity and acceptance?
Yeah. So I think we have to do something as basic. I think I would love to see the leaders take a less formal, structured approach and really find ways to have meaningful cultural exchange between members of the House, members of the Senate, but also helping people to understand how different and unique regions of the state are. Because of the ethnic heritage, because of shifting and new populations, because of just the general changing, ever constantly changing makeup of communities. We're sitting in Harrisburg. The Nepalese community, for example, is maybe in the last 10 years we saw an influx of Nepalese that literally took over 2 or 3 city blocks in Harrisburg. They have all now, most of them, learned English, learned the ropes of American citizenship, purchased homes, and are great neighbors. People love the Nepalese people. The Vietnamese boat people who came in the 70s and the 80s, refugees fleeing Vietnam. My barber is a Vietnamese refugee. 5 times it took him to come over on the boat before successfully escaping communism. He lived in the Philippines, so he actually speaks the same dialect, and we have a refresher course every time I'm in the barber chair. And I can give you, dozens of populations like that. David Owen, who's a councilman in Philadelphia, is one of the only people I know who has actually spent so much time curating the cultures in Philadelphia. But these are individual enclave conversations. There has to be a way that, in a more serious way, we showcase how different and diverse and unique and special Pennsylvania is. The old ethnic communities, so you can go to a Heinz History Center in Pittsburgh, you go all the way up to the top floor and you see not only Mr. Rogers is there, but then you see all of the relics and heritage pieces from the ethnic groups that came and settled my old legislative district. Mm-hmm. But then there's probably 10 more floors that you need to add on now of what Pennsylvania has become. That is unique to Pennsylvania. William Penn's idea of of taking a plot of land and allowing religious diversity, for example, to define blocks, but not in conflict with each other. You could have very robust, different ideas and opinions, but allow them to coexist. Phoenixville is a great example, where you have real diversity now on Main Street there. Very conservative people, very progressive people. And instead of those cultures fighting each other for space, both just have space. And there's a lot that they share, and then on some big issues they don't, but they do it with respect. So I think you have to have, the next generation of leaders has to have a vision on how you kind of diffuse the bomb and do it with slow motions. Both sides right now are looking at very aggressive kind of social movements that kind of define their politics. Instead of having conversation and building consensus, we're trying to essentially force views that people aren't ready to adopt yet. And when you do that and don't do it in a way that's sensitive to people's history and heritage, I think you can get it wrong. So I think that, and it begins with food, it begins with hospitality, it begins with just understanding someone's story, where they come from, that everybody didn't go to the best schools, or everybody in the city didn't have the reverse experience, that it's so very important, to understand that these are special people. The house is a great place to experience that too.
Yeah. Well, those are my questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add on this topic, or any?
Taylor, this was great. I'm glad
thank
you're
you
doing
so
that.
much. This is definitely a perspective we do not have, since we only have 4 or 5 Asian Americans in the House, in the Senate, in the history of it. So this is definitely a new perspective, and we were so glad you were willing to participate.
It was my honor, Taylor. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.